Hi, my name's Gary Marco, and this is
Jason Mahr.
and we are with myfreedomjourney.com. We have a series of podcasts we're putting online to try to help people find freedom. And we're going to talk about some great tools on how to live your life, have a better life, and get through certain things that you struggle with as you go through life. Last time, our last podcast, we talked a little bit about...
We talked about my journey.
Yeah, that's right.
My freedom journey, how we met and how things got started. And we left things off where we talk about setting up a judgment-free zone.
Right.
And this is something that I've implemented in the meetings that I have with people. I lead off with that, really.
Right.
Because that was the game changer for me. It wasn't the game changer in finding the root, but it was the game changer in helping me understand that the relationship was solid,
Right.
and that no matter what I said or did, obviously unless it was illegal or something like that,
Or something that put me in danger,
yeah.
right?
That Gary wasn't going to walk away from the friendship or the relationship. So it enabled me to open up and finally say, okay, here's what's really going on inside of me. Because, like I said in the last podcast, I've worked in the church world.
Right.
Where if you slip up or you mess up, you're done. Because you got to be perfect on stage. Which, newsflash, I'm just going to give you a peek behind the curtain. Yeah. No pastor is perfect.
No one's perfect, right?
None of them are.
I just think that's so funny how that is. It's like somehow or another they feel, and maybe this is the same with politicians or anyone that's at the top of their profession.
Yeah.
It's like they feel like they've got to come off as perfect and bulletproof, and they're anything but that. Mm-hmm. And the higher you get in an organization or in society, the bigger target you are. Mm-hmm. So if you try to show up as that, you're in for a tough go.
Yeah.
You're in for a tough go. So let me ask you a question. Mm-hmm. I just thought about this. So I set up this no judgment zone, right? Or for a judgment free zone as we went along our way and on our journey. Did you at any point test that to see how I react to it?
I mean, not intentionally.
Okay.
But now that you say that, I think I probably should have in some way. But I think I was still, if you heard the last podcast, I was still kind of in this environment where the ultimatum was set forth that I needed to implement these tools in my life, or I was going to lose my job.
Right. So
I wasn't really trying to rock the boat in any way. I was trying to stay in line. I was trying to I was honestly motivated to keep my job.
Right.
Which again, I found out in the process was it's a good motivation. It's not the right one though.
Right. Right.
I agree. Because and I tell people all the time, it's you got to do it right for yourself. You got to heal yourself because it's the right thing to do, regardless of how your job may play out or your marriage may play out or any of it. You have to get this right for yourself.
Sure.
And the first step in that is creating that judgment-free zone.
Yeah, and I was just thinking about all the different aspects that were going on at the time. Anytime someone struggles with anything, even if it's not an addictive behavior, but anything, there's so many tentacles to the whole problem. There's so many different things that impact that. Mm-hmm. So I remember as we were talking and getting through this, I don't remember how long it was that you had gone without viewing pornography. And we met, and you said, "Well, Gary," and you put your head down, and you were expecting me to, come after you, and you said, "I slipped up," or "I slipped up for a little while."
Yeah.
How far in your journey did that happen? Was it 6 months?
That was months.
Yeah, it was somewhere between 2 and 6 months, right?
Because we were meeting. The frequency of our meetings initially was like, I think we started like 3 times in a week, and then it was like, a couple times the next week, and then it was once a week,
right?
And we started to spread those out,
right? Right.
once we got the journey moving.
Right.
But there did come a time when the old me showed up.
Right. I think if I remember right, you said there was some pressure at home.
Yeah.
And that was one of the triggers, right? So the pressure, and then finally, boom.
Yeah.
And you had a little relapse.
Yep.
And I remember that so vividly because as you said that, I just basically said, well, okay.
Yeah.
So what are we going to do about it? Right? Yeah. It wasn't like, oh, you bad person, right?
Yeah, I was shocked.
But I do remember that.
Yeah, I was shocked because, I grew up in the environment where if I did something wrong, it was a given. There was going to be an hour-long lecture about how wrong you were and what you did wrong. Right. And you're like, look, I just told you I did wrong. Yeah. I know that I did wrong. But that was the response, which was I messed up, and he was like, okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your journey.
Yeah.
Let's keep moving forward.
So, and part of this whole thing is so many people, we talked about being perfect. None of us are perfect. So that means at some point or another, and for me, most of the time, you're going to make a mistake. But mistakes are great learning opportunities. And that's how I looked at what he went through. Because there's no person that's been addicted to anything, even if it's, again, cleaning the house, that didn't have some sort of relapse somewhere along the way. The key part of it is, what did you learn? Right. What did you learn? And how can you learn enough from that you don't fall back into that process again? Right. So I don't remember all of it, but what did you learn from that?
I learned, first of all, that there was grace in the journey, but there's still consequences for the behavior. And again, I work in sort of an environment where people are fully aware of grace. It's kind of like a grace-based community that we live in. So it's like, here's my license to go out and do something bad. Because I know, because you're a pastor or whatever, you're a gracious person, you're just going to be gracious to me. And you're going to forgive me. I think that only goes so far with you, because you have relationships, especially in the consulting world, and I've experienced this too in my own coaching experiences with people, where I've had to sit with people and go, you just don't get this. And you're wasting my time, and I'm wasting your time, so let's just agree to part ways.
Yeah, that's exactly
because you got to do the work, and that's part of the consequences of going back into the behavior. And I think that's the difference between a relapse and going back, just reigniting the behavior.
Right. And it was a relapse. It wasn't like a full blown, back down in the dark hole type of thing. And I think when you went through that, you really saw how the process went, because it was going smooth for a while, and then things started working up at home and at work a little bit. I remember there was some work stuff going on. So the pressure started building, which meant that you were feeling more and more rejected and more pressure, maybe at some level overwhelmed. Yep. And then all of a sudden it was like, okay, how did I get rid of this steam engine, this compressor of, however you want to call it, how do I get rid of this pressure? And you fell back into it. But you learned, okay, here are the steps that led to that. When can I stop at maybe step 1 or 2 versus going all the way to step 10 and getting in trouble? Yep. So it actually was a fantastic thing for it to happen, right? Because if it hadn't, then who knows where you'd be now. So,
and I remember we had this in that moment, and I remember it just kind of around that time. We started this visual illustration of the 275 loop.
Right. Yeah.
And if you're probably, if you know anything about Cincinnati, or most big cities have that loop, that goes around the city. So you don't have to go right through the city, but there's a bypass or whatever that goes around the city. And if you get on that loop, you could drive it till the wheels fall off and you won't go anywhere because you're just going to go in a circle. You just keep following that around and around in a circle. And so one of the practices that we implemented, obviously with Gary's help, was taking the next exit.
Yep.
Realizing when I was on that loop and
Right.
realizing that just like on the 275 loop right here near us, if I got on that loop and I got lost, all I have to do is get off the next exit.
And here, it's really cool because where I learned that, I was actually in I got divorced and I was really struggling with the recovery from it, and I would start thinking about my ex with another man, or I'd start thinking about some of the bad conversations we had, or I'd start thinking about something that happened in the relationship that just went sour, and I'd get stuck on it. And I'd get stuck on it so much that I'd waste away 4, 5, 6 hours of my day because I couldn't stop thinking about it. Mm-hmm. And the more that happens, the easier it is for you to follow in that cycle.
Right.
And I was talking to a counselor about it, and she said, you've got to figure out some way of breaking from that. She used the example of turning off a light switch. And I said, okay, let me try that. It didn't really work. And then I thought, I went back and told her, hey, here's what I thought about. Mm-hmm. If I'm supposed to change what I'm thinking about, what I'll do is I'll be on 275 and I'll think about taking the next exit, whatever the next exit is. And mentally, I'll think about putting on my blinker, going down the exit ramp, getting to the light at the end of the exit, taking a turn, what's around near that turn. So I'm actually now thinking about something totally different, totally different. And it was really interesting that once I started doing that, when I started these cyclical thought processes that I had, I would break through it sooner and sooner and sooner and sooner to a point where I could just say, stop thinking about that. And I'd stop thinking about it, right? So a lot of people that have addictions or have addictive behaviors, they get stuck on the thought, I need this, or this person is pushing my buttons, and I get upset, and that starts that first step, and they lead right to the whatever the addiction may be, right? So I found that as a super simple but useful tool to try to help change the way you're thinking. Because that's really, to have a better life, if your life isn't perfect now, and we've already talked about that it isn't, the best way to do is that you have to change the way you think. Yeah. There's got to be some sort of paradigm shift in the way you think, and we can talk about that. We'll talk about that on the next podcast, but a paradigm shift in how you think. And once you're able to do that, you can transform your life and really have much more success and fun in life.
But again, before we wrap this up, there's always a caveat here to the judgment-free zone. The judgment-free zone is really designed for honest communication,
right?
But there's also boundaries within that.
Sure.
That if I were to take advantage, and again, that's the discernment that you have as a leader and as a coach. I'm pretty sure Gary would be able to figure out pretty quickly if I was taking advantage of that and just going, you know what, whatever, I'm going to go do this and I'll meet with Gary. He's going to go report to my boss and say that everything's cool and I'm on the right track, but I can still have this behavior. It wouldn't last long.
No.
So, and again, we've both experienced that in different coaching environments, and that's healthy. It's to understand that there is grace in the journey, but there are also consequences.
Oh, sure.
To going back to the behavior, but not letting that become the focus. The paradigm shift is really key. Yeah, it really is. Mm-hmm. So why don't you just have yourself a wonderful day? Thank you for listening to our podcast. We'll talk about paradigm shifts sometime in the next few podcasts. Mm-hmm. I think it's an important thing to talk about. Please visit us at myfreedomjourney.com. And you have yourself a great day. Thanks for watching.